Hello everybody and welcome along to today's video, where today I'm continuing my countdown of every single episode of the Peter Capaldi era of Doctor Who, where last week, if you missed it, go back and check it out. I counted down numbers 40 to 31, so essentially the 10 worst episodes of the Peter Capaldi era. And this week we're going through the next 10, numbers 30 through 21. So let's get straight into it with number 30. So coming in at number 30 we have The Lie of the Land, which just doesn't really work for me, unfortunately. It is just a very, very disappointing end to the Monk trilogy. After you've had 2 or 3 weeks of build-up into this third episode, it just feels like it kind of throws away a huge amount of what they've set up in the previous 2 weeks. So in this episode we have the pointless fake regeneration, which is just such a waste of time and really annoying, to be honest. The actual resolution of the story is just not very good, that it's defeated by love. Again, 3 episodes of build-up and these all-powerful monks are defeated by love, which is just a really bad idea, to be honest. And the monks are useless in this episode. They do absolutely nothing. They don't have a single line of dialogue. They're just there. They just appear. They are statues. They literally do nothing to further the plot of this story. After having them built them up as, in episodes 6 and 7, Extremists in the Pyramid and the End of the World, as such these big, all-powerful creatures that can just control anything. Look, they can take over the world. They can cure the Doctor's blindness. They can run simulations of the whole of the Earth. They're all-powerful, and they just do nothing, and then are defeated by love. It just doesn't work for me at all, unfortunately. So it has to. It's not the worst Doctor Who, and there are, as the episodes I did rank it higher than obviously all the episodes from last week, because it does. There are some really nice scenes in it. Bill is fantastic. Pearl Mackie's probably pulls off one of her best performances, where she really leads a lot of this story through. And those scenes between the Doctor and Bill on the Monk ship early on are fantastically well performed, and some great dialogue in there about, although it's the Doctor pretending to be working with the monks, they are actually some very true sort of thoughts that he's giving there, and it's really well done, but then it just goes too far with the regeneration, and then the actual resolution to the whole story isn't very good. So I have to say it comes out at number 30. At number 29, I put Robot of Sherwood, which I actually quite enjoy. It is quite a good, fun little sort of romp of a comedy episode. Clearly, I think one of the key issues with this story is it doesn't fit where it goes. It's completely out of place in early Series 8. This episode should have come in the middle of Series 9 or something like that, when the Doctor had enlightened a lot more, because he's suddenly gone from being the whole am I a good man, really dark Doctor in the first 2 episodes to suddenly this joking, laugh, sort of not accepting Robin Hood, this full-on little comedy episode for an episode. And then we go to Listen, where he's already dark again. So I can see why people don't like to rate it very highly, because if you watch it in sequence, it's bad. It doesn't fit. It doesn't make any sense. But as a story on its own, it is quite fun. Having Robin Hood in Doctor Who is a great idea. I think personally it's a nice concept to explore, the Doctor not being able to accept that actually Robin Hood is real, which is great. And the sort of comedy between the Doctor and Robin Hood, I think, is really well played in this episode. And even the plot isn't that terrible with these robots. I quite like that. So overall, this is just quite a fun episode. And it's sort of the sort of episode that, although it isn't that good, I could go and sit down and watch quite a few times. It's sort of an easier episode to go back to, I think. So that's why I rated it not as low as some people, I think, at number 29. So coming in next at number 28, we have The Husbands of River Song, which is a reasonable Christmas special. I do quite enjoy it. It has 45 minutes of and 50 minutes of really good. The 45 minutes to start off with are just difficult for me to accept that River doesn't know it's the Doctor. It sort of I like the joke to start off with, but it stretches it way too far beyond the realms of belief. And the Doctor basically says that how on earth can she possibly not know it's him? Clearly it's because you've got to build up to the emotional sort of climax and the emotional reveal there, that is in her moment of need, the Doctor is there for her. But through this episode it just stretches it a little bit too far for my liking, and it's clearly meant to be a very comedic episode in the most part, but it's still fairly enjoyable, and the ending is absolutely wonderful. I do really adore those scenes on Jerusalem towards the end of the episode between the 12th Doctor and River, where it really is that lovely conclusion for the storyline of River Song, because most likely we won't see River Song again in Doctor Who, so that very much was her final goodbye to the 12th Doctor almost, but also with 12 just giving her one last little extra bit of time with those 24 years is just a fantastic way to end an episode. So certainly that's what brings it up, is those last 15 minutes or so, which are really wonderful. Number 27, we have Empress and Models, which for me I quite enjoy. It's probably the best Ice Warrior story since the Troughton days. I think it pretty beats the Peloton stories, at least in terms of the portrayal of the Ice Warriors, and it's definitely a better episode than Cold War, at least in my opinion. It's nice to see lots of Ice Warriors on Mars in the sort of Martian caves and everything. I think that's just fantastic. And having the idea of the Ice Queen is also quite nice as well, and I think she's a fairly well realised character in this episode. And I also do like the idea of the humans being the invaders in this story, where the Doctor's not quite sure who to side with or who he should, because this is the Martian planet, this is the planet of the Ice Warriors. The humans are the invaders, they're the ones doing the alien invasion in this story. So I thought that was quite an interesting storyline that isn't often explored in Doctor Who, that sort of the people that the Doctor usually sides with are actually the invaders in this story, and I really like that. So it's probably Gatiss' best script, or at least one of his better scripts for Doctor Who, certainly, and it's something I've really enjoyed. The ending's a little bit iffy, but it's nice to have an Alpha Centauri cameo as well, because that just is pretty mad that actually happened. But it does suffer again from being your sort of fairly straightforward mid-series Doctor Who episode, sort of squashed between the Monk trilogy, then you've got one more standalone episode and then the finale. It sometimes I think gets a little bit forgotten about, and therefore isn't necessarily the most spectacular episode of Doctor Who. But it's good fun, I do enjoy it. So next up at number 26, it's the Zygon Invasion. Part 1 of the Zygon two-parter from the middle of Series 9. This part certainly isn't as good as the second part, but it is quite good. It's a great way of setting up this story, I think. It really reintroduces the Zygons very well and brings them in as a proper threat to the series again when they sort of, after the peace treaty that's breaking down, it's nice to start exploring that again, I think. The sort of worldwide scale's pretty impressive in this story, as we're going over to New Mexico, we're going to this Turkmenistan place, we're also based in the UK as well, we're really spread out across the globe. And I think that's really well done in this story, and it's not something that's very usual for Doctor Who. Usually it's generally very focused on one location, at least when it's Earth-based, it's very much one location. So I thought that was a nice little twist and really make it feel like it is a Zygon invasion across the world, not just a little bit of London, like you often get with alien invasion stories. So that added a nice little twist to it. I thought that certainly creating the Bonnie character in this story is fantastic. That reveal at the end when we suddenly realise that, oh, that's not Clara, that's the Zygon, and they all get shot and killed. It's great. I really like that bit. Earlier on, they ruin it a little bit by having the scene outside the church when the soldiers lose all their military tactics for no apparent reason, just because they saw someone that's definitely a Zygon, but could be their mum because she looks like him. She looks like her mum, his mum, but in reality, they're in Turkmenistan, miles and miles and miles away from it, so they're blatantly going to be Zygons. But these blokes lose their and go and get themselves killed, and that's just an annoying scene for me. It annoys me a little bit, so that sort of brings the episode down a little bit, I think. But the cliffhanger is fantastic as well. I do really like this sort of that Bonnie's shooting straight at this plane, seemingly how on earth are you going to get out of this, and boom, there's the cliffhanger. And number 25 we have Into the Dalek, which for me I think probably fits about this point. I think sometimes it's a little bit underrated and a little bit forgotten about, because I do actually really enjoy this episode. Certainly visually it's probably one of the most impressive episodes of Doctor Who. Lots of those sort of interesting shots inside the Dalek, they're really kind of unusual, different locations and different sort of what it would be like to see inside a Dalek, I think is really well realised. And I do, as sort of straightforward as the plot is, it is just what it says on the tin, it is going inside a Dalek. I do still like that exploration. It's not something we've done in Doctor Who before, is exploring what really happens, how a Dalek really works. So that was quite nice, and then the sort of concept of is he a good Dalek or a bad Dalek and all this, and linking it into the Series 8 arc with the 12th Doctor and trying to understand whether he's a good man or not. I thought that's a very nice link there, and really kind of helped to start developing and helping the 12th Doctor to begin to understand, or even be a little bit more confused about exactly who he is and what sort of Doctor he is. So as much as it is a fairly straightforward story, I do quite enjoy the story and certainly want to go back to occasionally. At number 24 we have Death in Heaven, the Series 8 finale, and I must say at this point, certainly from this point, if not a little bit earlier onwards, none of these episodes I consider to be bad stories. There are a huge amount of really good stories in the Peter Capaldi era, at least in my opinion. So, of course, some of them have to be ranked down in the mid-20s and you think these aren't very good, but for me, this is still an enjoyable story. Death in Heaven. It's not as good as Dark Water, it's not the best finale we've had in Doctor Who, but it's by no means bad. There is some of the dialogue and some of the scenes with Missy and the Doctor and Clara and Danny out in that graveyard, that's absolutely fantastic. I really enjoy those scenes. It's such a sort of emotional climax to the series, I think, and really well realised. I mean, the problems with this story are probably the Cybermen that don't really do very much other than become sort of Iron Men-like creatures that can fly around and do literally anything. But all they actually do is blow up a little plane and then proceed to be controlled by Danny Pink, which really isn't very good for them. So that's sort of lets it down that the Cybermen, after being built up in episode 1 in the Dark Water, don't actually do anything in Death in Heaven. pretty much. And Missy's plan is also a bit nonsensical for me, that she just wants to give the Doctor an army because she wants to know that they're not so different or something. It doesn't quite work, because having all that build up throughout the series, it just doesn't quite sort of work for me as a little plot line there, I think. But overall, it's hardly a bad story. So coming in at number 23, we've got The Pyramid at the End of the World, the middle episode of the Monk trilogy. An episode which I think does quite nicely continue through the the monk story, and it really sets up that alien invasion of the monks very nicely. It kind of helps to build up how all-powerful and all-in-control these monks are, and really know everything about the world, and obviously at the end of it are able to restore the Doctor's blindness and all these kind of things. And I also really like that sort of concept they introduced through this episode, that the end of the world is a million tiny mistakes or 1,000 tiny mistakes. Lots and lots of little things go wrong, and little tiny things happen that just builds up to cause the end of the world. And that's probably what it'll be like in reality when eventually the world ends, or whatever. Being very serious there. It probably will be caused by lots of little things happening, rather than just one big nuclear bomb or something like that, I don't know. So I thought that was quite a nice idea to explore through this episode, and certainly these supporting characters are really good in this story as well, and it's just quite a nice continuation, I think, as much as the ending's a little bit annoying, because you know that Bill shouldn't do it, and it's blatantly a mistake that Bill's going to go and ask the monks for help. That's blatantly going to be a disaster. But you can also see her point of view, that she just wants us to help the Doctor. She's angry that the Doctor's been such an idiot and not told her what's happened, so she's thinking, here's a way of resolving it, I'm going to do it that way. And so our final couple of stories for today's video, coming in at number 22, it's The Pilot, which I do enjoy. It's certainly more about introducing Bill than it is about the plot. The plot is clearly secondary in this story. It's all about trying to develop the character of Bill in this story and really introduce her to the audience. And it does a very great job. She is instantly a sort of likeable companion, but also very different to Clara Oswald in the previous series, which was what was needed at this point to have that change up. And she already straight away sort of builds up a really nice relationship with the Doctor as well. I mean, I think some of it's a little bit too rushed through early on, when we kind of suddenly go from them pretty much meeting for the first time to having been there, sort of hanging around each other for months and months and months. It sort of didn't maybe build up that time and show that time well enough to really build up a relationship, I think. So it was a little bit hard to sort of believe how good friends they were in the space of 10 minutes in the episode that's meant to be 9 months in reality. But it's a fairly small criticism of it. But and then they go all over the universe, which is kind of a nice way of exploring different worlds, and kind of almost as Stephen was going for The Pilot, introducing Bill and the audience to all the different concepts within Doctor Who, of going back in time, forward in time, to alien planets, whatever else, or all over the Earth and everything. I thought that was quite well done, even if the actual plot of the story isn't that great. And so our final episode of today, number 21, it is Thin Ice, which is an episode that I find thoroughly enjoyable in sort of the early part of Series 10. It's another Sarah Dollard script, who's already written The Fantastic Face of the Raven for Series 9. I thought she did a really good job of portraying the relationship of the Doctor and Bill in this story. It was really nice to explore Bill's reaction to seeing someone die for the first time, which I don't think we really see that often in Doctor Who, is actually the sort of reaction of the companion who's never seen someone die before, because naturally they will in their time as a companion, and really kind of exploring that for the first time properly when she's watched a child die in front of her eyes, and her trying to come to terms with that and understand the Doctor's point of view on this as well, that he's seen it millions and millions of times, he's caused it millions of times, unfortunately, and that's what he has to live with. Otherwise he couldn't live if he couldn't just put it out of his mind and carry on. So I thought that was a really nice exploration of their characters. And the plot of this story is also reasonably enjoyable as well. I mean, it was fairly, well, it wasn't, I don't want to say simple, but it was fairly straightforward in terms of this alien that's not really bad, but this evil bloke from the 1800s is sort of tormenting this alien creature who's stuck under the Thames, but the Doctor releases her off to be allowed to run or sort of escape from this evil man. And it's a reasonably nice idea. It is fairly well realised in the story, and there's nothing particularly spectacular about it, which is it's your sort of mid-series story, I think, again, which it has that happens in Doctor Who. There are a lot of mid-series stories. Most of the series is mid-series, so there's going to be some episodes that are just fairly straightforward, and this is probably one of them. But there we go, guys. That's the next 10 episodes of the Peter Capaldi era counted down. Next week we're going for number 20 through to 11, so what of my episodes will just miss out on my top 10? We'll have to wait until next Saturday to find out for that, but I'd love to hear from you guys. If you're ranking all 40, I don't know, maybe you just focus on the top 10, but if you are ranking all 40, what's your 30 to 21? I'd love to see what they are. But other than that, guys, remember to like this video, subscribe if you're new here, tune in next week to see the next 10 episodes counted down. But other than that, I'll see you again next week for another video. Goodbye.